evening. My name is Reese Robinson, and I first want to start off by saying I've been in college for the first semester at OU, and any of you remember what your CAF was like? If anybody remember what your cafeteria was like in college, just know this meal here is amazing. Thank you. All right, let's get started. Good evening. My name is Reese Robinson, and I'm a proud graduate at Crossover Preparatory Academy and currently a freshman at the University of Oklahoma, majoring in biology, pre-med track, Boomer Sooner. My time at Crossover Prep taught me the values of integrity, responsibility, and what it truly means to live with purpose. It shaped my understanding of brotherhood and teamwork, showing me the power of having a community that pushes you to grow. CPA also challenged me to live a life that honors God in everything I do. Those lessons continue to guide me today as I pursue my goals at the University of Oklahoma and beyond. Now, it is my honor to introduce this evening's distinguished guest, Dr. Robert L. Woodson Sr., founder and president of the Woodson Center, 1776 Unites, and Voices of Black Mothers United. He is an influential leader on issues of poverty alleviation and empowering disadvantaged communities to become agents of their own uplift. His social activism dates back to the 1960s, when as a young civil rights activist, he developed and coordinated national and local community revitalization programs. During the 1970s, he directed the Administration of Justice Division of the National Urban League. Later, he served as a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Dr. Woodson is frequently featured as a commentator in national and local broadcasts, including C-SPAN, CNN, and Meet the Press. He is a contributing editor to The Hill, The Washington Examiner, and The Wall Street Journal. It has published in many national newspapers and journals such as Forbes, National Review, and The Washington Post. He is the recipient of the prestigious John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Genius Fellowship Award, the Bradley Prizes presented by the Lynd and Harry Bradley Foundation, and the Presidential Citizens Medal, the 2018 William Wilberforce Award, the Heritage Foundation's 2020 Salvatore Prize for American Citizenship, the 2021 Hillsdale College Freedom Leadership Award, and many other honors. He is also the author of several books, including most recently, A Pathway to American Renewal, Red, White, and Black. Tonight, he will be in conversation with Philip Abode, Crossover Prep's Executive Director. Please join me in welcoming them this evening.
Well, first let me say, Mr. Woodson, that it is an honor to be sharing this stage with you. And 45 years of the Woodson Center. Like, that's quite an accomplishment. Lord willing, Crossover will make it that far. But in those 45 years, can you share a little bit more about the Woodson Center's work and some of the examples of things you guys have been a part of?
Yes, but before doing so, I want to introduce my traveling companion, Dr. Will Crosby. He is the CEO of the Pineywood Day School, 116-year-old boarding school, black boarding school, Christian boarding school in Pineywood, Mississippi. And Will is a graduate of that school, and also after finishing law school, University of Virginia, and Harvard, he was involved in a very lucrative law firm in Washington, but 13 years ago gave it up to go back to save Pineywood. And I'm delighted to and he is next year will be my successor. So I'll be stopping aside. But the Woodson Center, thank you for inviting me, but the Woodson Center, I founded it 45 years ago. And I founded it because I'm a veteran of the civil rights movement. I was active as a young civil rights activist in Westchester, Pennsylvania, the home of Bayard Rustin. And I met Dr. King through Bayard Rustin, and I was leading demonstrations in that city. But I became disenchanted over two issues. One was forced busing for integration. I was against forced busing for integration. I said the opposite of segregation is desegregation, not integration. And so they said, well, Bob, your position is consistent with the Klan and the John Birch Society. I said, well, if Hitler likes classical music, am I supposed to not like it? So we need to take positions on truth based upon the evidence that we have and not whether it's favorable to our reputation. But the second issue that brought me here was we were leading demonstrations outside of a pharmaceutical company, and on the picket line were hairdressers, barbers, ordinary black folks. And when they desegregated, they hired 9 black PhD chemists. When we approached them about joining the movement, they said they got this because they were qualified, not because of the sacrifice. I realized then that there was a bait and switch going on, where the issue is no longer race, it's class. And so I left the civil rights movement over that and began to work on behalf of low-income people of all races. Dr. King said, what good does it do to have the right to live in to walk into a restaurant of your choosing if you don't have the means to exercise it? So it's not just opening the doors of opportunity, you have to prepare people to walk through it. And the movement was not interested in that. So I established the Woodson Center to go into low-income communities and work on behalf of low-income people of all races. The biggest challenge we have today is not race, it's a crisis in grace. And so the Woodson Center helps low-income people. I call them Josephs, and I'll explain why. That I tried to look for a model to talk about how wealthy people and low-income people can work together to rebuild society. And I found it in the book of Genesis with Joseph. And I wrote a book called The Triumphs of Joseph. Joseph, as you know, was from a dysfunctional Hebrew family. And Joseph was a little arrogant too. He told his father and his brothers, I saw you all bowing down before me. And that does not ingratiate you to your peers, to your siblings. And of course, you know the story how they took his robe and killed an animal and sold him to the Ishmaelites, who were slave traders in Egypt. And David found himself as a slave in the house of Potiphar. But he was the best slave in the house of Potiphar. God was blessing him in his condition of servitude. And he was a very handsome young man, and Potiphar's wife lusted for him. But he refused her advances because he had lateral integrity and horizontal integrity. He knew it was violating the trust of his master, but a sin against his God. He refused, and she came on to him, and she accused him of attempted rape. And he went to prison, where Joseph became the best prisoner. And he languished there from the time he was 17 till he was 31. And 2 of Pharaoh's servants were in the prison, and he interpreted their dreams, and they promised to help him. And they got out, and they forgot about him. But Pharaoh had a dream that none of his counselors or lawyers or PhDs could answer. And so the servant said, there is a young man in the prison who can interpret dreams. So they cleaned Joseph up and brought him before Pharaoh, and he says to Pharaoh said, I understand you can interpret dreams. He said, no, I am merely the vessel. God does so. It took that time to cleanse him of self-importance. God can't use you if you are the center of the tension. And it took all that suffering. But Joseph then said, there'll be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine, and save up 20%. That's the first time there we have flat tax. And so what Pharaoh did was then appoint Joseph as the Secretary of Agriculture, second in command only to him. And the lessons of that story, if Joseph had become bitter or resentful or lost his faith in God, God couldn't have used him. But he was faithful even though he was treated unjustly. And there are 2 types of Josephs that I look for in the inner city. Or let me just say, if it wasn't for the good Pharaoh, we wouldn't know about Joseph. A good pharaoh is a powerful, rich person who's able to dream bad dreams in good times, to be able to look over the horizon and be troubled, but also able to reach across racial and ethnic lines and empower a 31-year-old uneducated Hebrew shepherd and raise him up. And that partnership saved not only the family that betrayed him, but the Egyptians who enslaved him. So we use that as a model when we go into the inner city. We look for two types of Josephs. We look for those that are in poverty but not of poverty. If you say 70% of black households are raising children who are dropping out of school and jail and drug, it means 30% are not. No one, right or left or center, ever goes into the homes of the 30% to ask, what's going on there? That's a source of renewal. Those are the Josephs. They are in poverty but not of poverty. And the other type of Joseph, those that were predators, prostitutes, had fallen, but through God's grace, they become redeemed and transformed. And they can serve as a witness to young people in these communities who are struggling, having a value crisis. And they can witness to them and say, if I was able to become redeemed, given how messed up my life was, there's hope for you. So the Woodson Center goes into low-income, high-crime areas, and we look for these two types of Josephs. They are like social entrepreneurs. My name used to be the Woodson Enterprise. We should have enterprise in the name, National Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, because we believe that the principles of the market economy should apply to the social economy. According to David Birch at MIT, only 3% of the population are entrepreneurs, but they generate 70% of the jobs. You all are social entrepreneurs. But these social entrepreneurs tend to be C students, not A students. A students come back to universities and teach, C students endow. Because smart people have to have all the answers before they act, and when they act, the opportunity's gone. And so what we believe, and so this became a foundation of what we do. So we go into these low-income communities as opposed to what the federal government does is parachute in experts from outside. We look for internal leaders, but entrepreneurs tend to be poor bookkeepers. And so what they need is not only capital, but training and stewardship. So we're like venture capitalists without capital. We have to beg with dignity for what we get. But once we come into a community, a very troubled community, we look for the Josephs in there. And once we find them, we apply Miracle Grow in form of training and technical assistance and coach them. And so we have been able to address problems that the traditional programs, poverty programs and professional, have failed to do, even though they have spent more money than we've used to fight all of our wars. And so it's a whole different approach. And so that's it.
Yeah. And yeah, give it up for. And I've been a fan of yours since I saw you on the Glenn Lowry show. And one of the things that I respected the most about your story is the fact that you've been going at this work for over six decades now, 60 years since the Civil Rights Movement, trying to make the world a better place. And I'm assuming that in that 60 years that there's some wisdom that you gained through that, where you've seen what works and you've seen what doesn't work. And so what are some of the lessons that you learned over that?
Some of the lessons that I learned, particularly from Dr. King, was that real leadership doesn't always reflect popular opinion or the consensus of the majority. Real leaders are able to take risk. They put the telling of truth ahead of anything else. And Dr. King, when the students at Greensboro were picketing at Woolworths, The traditional leadership in Atlanta sent him there to tell the students that we're taking a legalistic approach and not to engage in civil disobedience. And the students told King, either lead, follow, or get out the way. And he chose to lead. And then, but when he went into Birmingham, he was not accepted by the local leadership either. It was the young people. When King wrote his letter from a Birmingham jail, he said that the greatest stumbling block for black progress is not the White Citizens Council or the KKK. It is the white moderate. He said lukewarm acceptance from people of goodwill is more difficult to accept than outright rejection of people of ill will. That got him into a whole lot of trouble. But King prevailed. And so part of the lessons that I have learned from it is that I don't think we ought to take positions because it enhances our own personal. And I think we have to tell the truth, especially when it's inconvenient to us. And I've had a lot of inconveniences saying that the civil rights movement has lost its way and has become part of the race grievance industry. And it's very painful for me to say that, but I have witnessed it up close. And what we have today is not a race problem, we have a grace problem. And the greatest problem facing today is, as I said, it's not race. It is a moral and spiritual freefall that is consuming our children. The highest form of the death rate for inner city blacks is homicide. Appalachian whites is prescription drugs. And for Silicon Valley, it's suicide. People don't realize Silicon Valley, where you have two-parent households, with most parents having master's degrees with an income of $190,000, the suicide rate among teenagers is 6 times the national average. And so what we have done at the Woodson Center, we have a group called Voices of Black Mothers United. These are moms who lost their kids to homicide. And they have come together to commiserate with one another, but also to engage the community in stopping the violence. But they have reached out to the moms from Silicon Valley and from Appalachia and what we call the Mothers Consortium. And for 3 days, we came together and united in our grief, but also to say to the country that we must move beyond race if we are to address this moral and spiritual free-for-all. That's what you all are doing here at this institution. And I'm telling you, there's no greater calling. I want to just read briefly what Samuel Adams wrote. He said that a general dissolution of principles and manners will more surely overthrow the liberties of America than the whole force of a common enemy. While the people are virtuous, they cannot be subdued. But when they lose their virtue, they will be ready to surrender their liberties to the first internal or external invader. For if virtue and knowledge are diffused among the people, they will never be enslaved, and this will be their greatest security. That neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberties and happiness of people whose manners are universally corrupt. So it isn't race, it isn't economic, it is moral and spiritual. You all understand that we need models for moral and spiritual restoration. We need examples of how we can save. There are people who are trying to destroy this country by saying America is racist. And if you continue to bombard our children with the false narrative that they live in a country that hates them, that they're either villains or they're victims, after a while, they begin to believe these messages, and we shouldn't surprise anyone that if you are conditioned to devalue your life, you'll take your own or someone else's. And so we have a serious problem. If our problems were economic, God would have sent an economist. If our problems were education, he'd have sent an educator. But because our problems are sin, he sent a Savior.
Amen. And so with that being the issue, but then you also see brokenness in these communities where you do see high poverty and broken down families. Like, what do you see as like the path forward?
We really need examples. You see, right now, the problems that we're confronting today won't be solved by electing people to office. You know, and it won't be found by supporting just these people who will see engaging in combat, immoral, tribal warfare. It's going to be solved in the culture, and it's going to be solved at the local level. That's where it's going to be solved, not or looking at it through the lens of both the left and the right of center. Bill Bennett one time said that when the left sees poor people and black people, they see a sea of victims, and people on the right see a sea of aliens. So you can choose to be ignored or patronized. And so the answers are going to be found in the communities. It's going to be in schools like this. It's going to be like with Will. So the real challenge is, how do we develop a movement, a reformation among the people? If you go look at the Clackham group at the turn of the 18th century in England, 20 people came together. An ex-slave who wrote an autobiography of slavery, a journalist, and they just came together. And for 40 years, they worked to, in the culture, the way you all are working, to present an alternative. And the English Parliament ended slave trade when it was against their economic interest. But it all started with a small group of people who were motivated by God's call on their life. And I think that America is going to be called back to its founding principles. But people are using race to denigrate the very foundational principles: love of God, love of neighbor, love of country. And they're using the race. And so for that reason, I have become a CRE, a certified racial exorcist. So all you guilty white folks out there, let me just say, you are absolved, you are absolved, you are absolved. Now let's get to work solving the problems the way you're doing here. We need, I came from a tour of the school, and I went back to my room, and I looked at my computer, and they said that a mother and a 9-year-old in Chicago was severely beaten by elementary school children. They're in a hospital now. Where does this come from? There are, in the last year, 4 13-year-old girls that have been charged with murder. This is not going to be solved through politics or political debate. It's a retail problem, and it's going to be solved in the communities. We need models of moral excellence. We need to begin to give our children who are in desperate need of guidance. What you're doing is educating them. What's more important is giving them a moral and spiritual foundation. When I came to your school today, there was a little 13-year-old named Junior. He came up to Will and me with just confidence, saying, "Hello, how are you?" And so we said, "Well, why are you here? What do you like about the school?" He said, "This is really like, I've been to other schools, but this is like a family." Thank you. He walked away. I said, "Case closed." I mean, character is revealed in small things. It isn't grandiose presentations that are made. And you and others like you, the real Josephs of this country, we must provide the kind of support that we're giving to these race grievance people. We need a change in the way that that's why Will and I, we're engaged in raising $50 million so we can come to institutions like this and help you to close the gap between what you can afford to do and what you are capable of doing. And we want to bring you together There are about 12 other schools like you around the country. You all need to meet. You need to exchange strategies, and we need to heighten your profile so the whole nation looks to you instead of the race hustlers for guidance.
Well, no, that's a lot. That's it's deep. But, you know, we have a lot of folks here in the room, whether they're staff who have gone all in, moved to the community, engaging in this work, some of our generous partners who have supported us and enabled us to do it, and even some folks who are like, I don't even really know who Crossover is, that are here tonight. What would be your advice as we're moving forward, you know, and to be able to do this work well and to make the kind of impact that we're trying to make in the community?
What I would suggest, as I do to my grassroots leaders, we have about 3,000 grassroots leaders in 39 states. And when we come together for gatherings like retreats or conferences, the different racial groups, racial animus never came up one time, because 80% of my close friends have letters in front of their names, not behind their names. When we come together, we talk about what is our strategies of overcoming brokenness in our lives. So you need to continue to do what Mother Teresa said, you must be faithful and not always seek success. She was walking in Bombay, and Senator Packwood was walking with her, and he said, you must be frustrated that you're not more successful. After all, there are 3 million people that need your help, and you can only help 300. She said, God doesn't require success of me, but faithfulness. Because if I'm faithful in what I'm doing, he will determine when success comes. And so I'm saying to you, stay the course and continue to be who you are, the way you are. And I really think God is going to answer our call. I think it was Bishop Sheen. When I was a kid, I used to watch him all the time. He said something 50 years ago that applies today. He said that the eagle, the reason that the eagle is the national symbol of the country, that it nests high in the crevices of the mountains. And then at a certain point, it takes the feathers out of the nest of the eaglet and pushes it over the side, and it falls to the ground. And just before it reaches the ground, she swoops down, picks it up, takes it back up, and does that until it learns to fly. He said, America is like that eaglet. Just before she's ready to crash, God is going to come lift her up and take her up. We're at that point now where I think God is going to grab us and take us up in the midst of all this confusion. But in order to know what that mountain looks like, we got to have models of what moral excellence is. And this place is a model of what moral excellence is. Piney Wood is an example of moral excellence. It's a laboratory that demonstrates that our children are hungry to be redeemed. And so we should not be frustrated because it looks like everything is dark around us. But we must be faithful. So I'm saying to the Calvary is on the way.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Once again, you've been a hero of mine ever since I saw you on that show, and just to see how you've been able to navigate some of these difficult conversations that have gone on around race and about just making a difference in communities and all of that. What are some final words that you want to share with us before we wrap it up?
My final word is really that something that Whitney Phipps said, and he says that it is in the quiet crucible of your personal suffering that your noblest dreams are born, and God's greatest gifts are given in compensation for what you have been through. And I think that you must keep the faith, stay focused, and not give up. God is blessing us and all of us. But America's finest is in front of us. But we must not allow race hustlers, we must not allow those who want to denigrate the values separate us. Let's remain together and unite in God's purpose. Okay?
Amen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Woodson Sr.